Chapter 1, They Came. It was a most ordinary day. The sky was clear, the wind was lazily fluttering the leaves of the trees, and I was standing outside my small Idaho cabin, about to dig a few potatoes out of the bed. A skillet of butter was already rustling in the kitchen, and the aroma of roasting garlic promised a cozy dinner. I had no idea that in that moment I would be part of a story that would change the world. The noise started suddenly. At first I thought it was a low-flying airplane or helicopter. But when I looked up, I saw an object hovering in the sky that clearly didn't belong to our machinery. It was a ship, sleek, silvery, gleaming in the sunlight. It hovered just above my field of potatoes. I froze, the shovel fell out of my hands, and my heart pounded like a drum. And then the ship slowly descended without making the slightest noise. Chapter 2, First Encounter. 3 figures emerged from the ship. Tall, lean, with skin that shone silver. Their eyes were large and shiny, and instead of a mouth, they had a thin, barely visible slit. Their hands had long fingers that shimmered slightly, as if they were made of a translucent material. I froze, feeling my feet pressed to the ground. One of the figures stepped forward and held out a hand toward me. It opened its mouth and there was a strange vibrating sound, but a moment later I heard a clear voice right inside my head. "We come in peace." I swallowed and tried to say something, but the words stuck in my throat. My hands pointed involuntarily at the potato field behind me, as if I wanted to say, "This is all I have." The alien looked toward the field and then back at me. "This is your main source of energy?" It's potatoes," I finally squeezed out. They looked at each other. Then the other one raised his hand, and a small triangular device that looked like a projection screen appeared above his palm. It began to flash rapidly with multicolored lights. "Potatoes," said the first one. "Interesting. We've heard about your food." Chapter 3, Potato Interest. I didn't know what to do. For a second I thought maybe I'd just been out in the sun too long or inhaled something wrong, but the silvery figures stood right in front of me, their ship making a low whirring sound behind them. "Would you like to try it?" I asked, still not believing this was happening. The aliens looked at each other again, and the one with the projection device nodded. "Yes, but first, can I ask how you prepare it?" I turned slowly toward my house. There, in the kitchen, everything was ready for dinner: butter in the skillet, garlic on the cutting board, and fresh potatoes that I had just washed. "Okay. Follow me," I said, waving my hand. They followed me, their movements smooth and strangely synchronized. When we entered the kitchen, one of them looked around and said thoughtfully, "Is this a place for cooking?" "Yeah, my kitchen," I nodded, pulling out a knife and potatoes. "Watch." I began to show the cooking process: how to peel the potatoes, how to dice them, how to heat the oil. The aliens watched intently, their big eyes unblinking and the device flashing faster and faster. "Heat processing," one of them said. "It's primitive, but interesting." "Primitive?" I grinned, tossing potato slices into the pan. "Wait till you try it." Chapter 4. First Bite. When the potatoes had fried to a golden crust, I added a little salt and served them to the aliens on a plain white plate. "Come on," I said, gesturing for them to try some. The first of them picked up a piece of potato with his long fingers and held it up to the thin slit on his face. The slit opened, revealing something like flexible, transparent teeth. He carefully placed the potato inside and closed his mouth. A second of silence. Then his eyes lit up brightly. "Unbelievable," came a voice in my head. This is delicious." The other two instantly reached for the plate. They began to taste piece after piece, making a sort of melodic humming noise that seemed to signify pleasure. "Your potatoes," said one of them, "are a source of pure energy and gustatory pleasure." Thanks," I said, not knowing how to respond to such praise. Chapter 5. The Great Potato Experiment. After the plate was empty, the aliens started asking endless questions. Where do potatoes grow? How many types are there? Can they be used in other forms? I told them everything I knew, even showed them a couple other recipes, mashed potatoes and baked potatoes. They were delighted. "We should research this," said one of them. "It could be the basis for a new form of diplomacy." "Diplomacy?" I questioned. "Yes. We could use potatoes to bring worlds together." It made me laugh. I'd always thought diplomacy was built on words or technology, but the idea that potatoes could become a universal language was absurd. But they seemed to be serious. Chapter 6. Potatoes for the Universe. The aliens asked permission to take some potatoes onto their ship for study. I gave them a whole bucket, not realizing it would change not only my life, but the life of the entire planet. The next day their ship left and I went back to my normal life. But a few weeks later, more ships appeared in the sky. As it turned out, potatoes were a galactic hit. Diplomats from all over the galaxy began flocking to my little home to sample the earthly wonder. In time, the aliens and I opened a whole chain of interstellar restaurants where potatoes were served in every possible form. Chapter 7. Potato Diplomacy. When I told my friends and neighbors that aliens had come to my house for potatoes, no one believed me. Even when television began to broadcast interviews with interstellar visitors talking about the great discovery of the potato tuber, I was still considered crazy. But that all changed one day when a government delegation showed up on my doorstep. "Mr. Wilson," said a man in a strict suit, introducing himself as an employee of some important agency, "did you really give a bucket of potatoes to aliens?" "Well, yes," I answered, shrugging my shoulders. "Why, couldn't you?" The man sighed heavily. "Do you realize that you've just become Earth's representative in the first intergalactic trade agreement?" I almost dropped my coffee mug. "What?" Chapter 8, The Potato Conference. A week later, I was invited to New York City, where representatives from 15 alien civilizations had gathered in a huge conference room. They had come to discuss the potato question. The guests were diverse, tall and shiny, like the first aliens, as well as small furry creatures that looked like walking pillows. Some looked like giant insects, others resembled colorful jellyfish floating in the air. "Mr. Wilson," one of the alien delegates began, "you have discovered an incredible resource for us. Potatoes are not only delicious, but also have a high energy value. We wish to establish trade with your planet." I felt 1,000 eyes on me, earthly and beyond. "Okay, but potatoes only grow in certain conditions," I said, trying to sound confident. "We can't just hand them over to everyone." The aliens hesitated. One of them raised his hand, and his voice echoed in my head. "We can provide technology that will improve your agricultural methods. In exchange, we want recipes." "Recipes?" I interjected. Yes. We have studied your culture and realized that the ways you cook your food are something that makes it unique. We want to learn to cook like you do. Chapter 9. Alien Chefs. A few months later, the first interstellar cooking schools opened on Earth. I became a potato consultant, even though I thought it was ridiculous myself. I even wrote a book, The Potato Way to the Stars, which suddenly became a bestseller. The aliens weren't just learning how to cook. They were experimenting. One civilization added spices to potatoes that made the food glow in the dark. Others came up with a cooking method that made potatoes crispy but cold inside. My field became a tourist attraction. People and aliens flew in to see where it all began. Chapter 10. Potatoes as a language of peace. Every day I noticed how the world was changing. People began to interact more often with people from other planets. Fear and wariness were replaced by curiosity. More and more countries opened their kitchens to aliens, and in return they received technology and resources that improved life on Earth. Soon the potato became a symbol of peace. Its image appeared on flags, statues, and even spaceships. I never thought potatoes would change the world, I once said to a friend of mine, looking up at the starry sky. And not just the world, he replied. It changed the whole galaxy. Chapter 11. New Horizons. But the story didn't end there. Soon I received an invitation to travel to another planet to try their version of potato dishes. My trip was the beginning of a new chapter, interstellar culinary tourism. Each planet offered something unique. On one, potatoes could change flavor depending on the mood of the eater. On another, they were cooked in weightlessness, creating culinary works of art. I realized that food is not just a source of energy. It is a way of communication that unites even the most diverse beings. Chapter 12. The First Interstellar Culinary Tour. When I first set foot on the surface of the planet Zelfar, I felt like I was in a different reality. The air was filled with sparkling aromas that words could not describe. The planet itself seemed to be preparing to welcome the Earth delegation. The locals, who looked like walking trees with soft, glowing branches, greeted us warmly. They called themselves Lorwan and were proud of their unusual culinary techniques. They invited us into their main restaurant, built right in the center of a giant clearing surrounded by unseen plants. I was seated at a table covered with a material that resembled transparent ice but was warm to the touch. A plate appeared on the table with an unusual dish, potatoes cooked so that they glowed with a soft golden light. "This is our contribution to the galactic potato culture," said one of the Lorven, his branch extended and pointed to the dish. I tasted it cautiously. The flavor was unearthly. The fine texture of the potatoes was matched by invisible bubbles of flavor that seemed to explode in my mouth. "What is this?" I asked, feeling overwhelmed with excitement. "We have injected crystals from our planet into your tuber that enhance the perception of flavor." Chapter 13. Culinary Exchange. Every new dish I tried on Zelfar revealed something new to me. They cooked potatoes in ways I had never imagined, roasting them in an atmosphere of a different density, mixing them with gaseous spice molecules, or turning them into a vapor that could be inhaled. In return, I showed them how to make classic mashed potatoes with milk and butter. They were amazed at the simplicity of this recipe. "So simple," one of the Lorven said, slowly tasting the mashed potatoes. "And yet, it's incredible." Our exchange of experiences continued for several days. I wrote everything down in my notebook, promising myself that I would share these recipes with the chefs on Earth. Chapter 14. Returning home. When I returned to Earth, I was greeted with triumph. My small restaurant in Idaho was now the center of galactic culinary culture. People came from all over the world to sample dishes inspired by my interstellar travels. But the most amazing thing was that the aliens were starting to open their own restaurants on Earth. Each one offered unique dishes that humans grew to love. The potato variety became a symbol of unification. Chapter 15. Galactic Culinary Federation. A few years later, something truly grand was created, the Galactic Culinary Federation. It was a community of chefs, scientists, and farmers from different planets who worked together to study how to use food to promote peace and understanding. My name was now mentioned in history books. People spoke of me as the man who proved that food unites worlds. Although I did not seek fame, it pleased me to think that the potato, this humble crop, had become a symbol of harmony in the universe. Chapter 16. A new challenge. But life does not stand still. One day representatives of a new race who had just begun to make contact with other worlds came to me. "We have heard of your potatoes," they said. "But we have a crop we would like to introduce to you. This is our root vegetable." They handed me something that looked like a huge glowing carrot. "Can potatoes coexist with other crops?" they asked. I smiled. Of course. That's what cooking is all about, combining, not replacing. And so began a new chapter of my adventure. Chapter 23. Potato Salad. With each passing year, I felt more and more responsible for what began as an accidental contact with aliens. I became known as the Potato Ambassador, the man who used food to build bridges between worlds. One day, I received an unexpected invitation. The Lorvin race offered me to become an honorary member of their diplomatic mission. Their leader explained, "You don't just cook. You understand how food can change hearts. We need someone who can use this art to peacefully unite the galaxy." I agreed, though I had doubts inside. Would I be able to pull it off? Chapter 24. Expedition to Alakar. Our first mission was to the planet Alakar, a planet known for its tense political situation. Its inhabitants, the Alakars, were excellent engineers, but their society suffered from internal conflicts between two main groups, those who lived in underground cities and those who lived on the surface. We decided to organize the first intercultural dinner to bring them together. The Alakarans had long ago lost their culinary tradition, preferring artificially created nutritional capsules. "Food is a weakness," said one of their leaders. "We have no need for it." But I knew that food is more than just nourishment. It's emotion. It's memory. It's an opportunity to understand each other. Chapter 25. The Mystery of the Alakara Route. While walking through the underground tunnels, I came across an old warehouse where strange roots were stored. One of the local engineers told me that these roots were once a staple in their diet, but they had long since fallen into disuse. I decided to give it a try. The root was bitter, but reminded me of a potato in its raw form. I began experimenting. I fried it, boiled it, mixed it with earth spices. The result was a dish I called Alakara mashed potatoes. At a dinner where both sides of the conflict were gathered, I served it along with the classic earth potato salad. When the leaders tasted it, their expressions changed. "It's delicious," one of them admitted. "It reminds me of dishes my grandmother used to make," said another. The dinner ended not just in peace, but with an agreement to restore tradition and work together on the future of the planet. Chapter 26. Alien Cuisines on Earth. When I returned to Earth, I found that my idea had taken on a life of its own. Chefs from all over the galaxy began opening restaurants on Earth, turning it into a culinary center. The Lyrian Cafe became especially popular, serving desserts made of glowing lyron that glowed in the dark. Also, the Croton restaurant became famous for its soup, which changed flavor depending on your mood. People no longer looked at the stars with apprehension. Now they saw them as an opportunity for new discoveries and friendship. Chapter 27. New Challenges. But not everything was going smoothly. Some groups on Earth didn't trust the aliens. They felt that such integration threatened Earth's culture. One day I received a letter from a group of protesters. "We don't want potatoes, the symbol of our planet, to be used for alien propaganda." I decided to meet with them and prepared a simple dish for them, home-fried potatoes. At the table we started talking, and gradually their tension disappeared. "We are not against peace," said one of them. "We are just afraid of losing ourselves." I realized that it is important not only to unite cultures, but also to preserve their uniqueness. Chapter 28. Culinary Conference of Worlds. The first Culinary Conference of Worlds was organized in Idaho. Delegates from 20 planets attended. Each brought their main dish to present to the others. Among the most memorable were crystal cake from the planet Zelfar, which shimmered with the colors of the rainbow. Sand soup from the planet Narx, made from desert minerals. Galactic mashed potatoes that combined potatoes and lyron. This conference not only discovered new flavors, but also became a platform for discussions about the future of cooking. Chapter 29. Potatoes of the Future. Engineers from different worlds have begun to develop ways to modify potatoes so that they can grow even in the harshest conditions. On Mars, for example, the first plantations where potatoes were grown in low temperatures have already appeared. On Earth, however, potato farms have become a symbol of sustainable agriculture. Young people were enthusiastically studying agronomy, dreaming of creating their own interstellar recipes. Chapter 30. The Last Supper. At the end of my life, I decided to gather all the friends and colleagues who had helped me along the way. Earthlings, aliens, scientists, farmers, and cooks gathered around one table. We ate simple mashed potatoes and shared stories of how this journey began. Looking back on all that was accomplished, I realized that food truly has the power to change the world. It has become a language that everyone understands, no matter what planet you come from. When dinner was over, one of the Lorvin approached me. "Thank you for showing us how simplicity can be brilliant." I only smiled, looking up at the stars. Chapter 38. Traveling Beyond the Galaxy. My reputation as a galactic cook extended far beyond the known star systems. One day I was approached by a member of a race no one had ever heard of before. Their name was Zaltirians, and they claimed their planet was beyond the borders of our galaxy. "We have come for help," said their leader, a creature whose skin shimmered like liquid metal. "Our people are dying. Food has become a routine for us, losing all meaning. We have heard that you can bring back the flavor of life." It was a challenge I couldn't ignore. My team and I embarked on a journey that lasted several months. Chapter 39. The Mystery of the Zaltirians. When we arrived on their planet, I was amazed at its beauty. Everything around it sparkled like the surface of water in the sunlight. But the inhabitants looked tired, apathetic. It appeared that their culture had completely lost diversity in their diet. They consumed only synthetic energy, which sustained their bodies but took away the pleasure of eating. I decided to start with a simple one, potatoes. But their planet had no soil suitable for growing them. Then I remembered the star potatoes from the ice worlds and suggested adapting them for their environment. Chapter 40. The potato as a catalyst. The Zaltirians tasted handmade food for the first time in centuries. They did not immediately realize how they felt, but soon their faces lit up. One of the elders said, "This feels like childhood. When we still felt joy." Every day their interest in food grew. I began to teach them how to cook, to combine ingredients, to experiment. Simple potatoes became the basis for creating new dishes that inspired them to revive art, music, and socializing. Chapter 41. The Energy of Flavor. Zaltirian scientists have begun to study the effects of food on its inhabitants. It turned out that tastes activated the same neural circuits in them as creativity. This was a revolution. They developed devices that could amplify flavors, allowing each meal to become a unique experience. For example, the same dish could remind one person of rain and another of a warm summer evening. Chapter 42. Gastronomic Diplomacy. After the restoration of the Zaltirian culinary culture, the Zaltirians decided to send delegates to Earth to share their experiences. They brought technology that allowed them to enhance Earth dishes, making them not only tasty, but emotionally meaningful. Soon a joint project between Earth and the Zaltirians was called emotional cuisine. Restaurants utilizing this technology began to open throughout the galaxy. Chapter 43. A New Challenge, Time Cooking. I was once approached by a scientist from Earth with a new project. "We are studying the possibility of creating dishes that can be eaten in different time streams," he said. The idea was to create food that would retain its flavor and texture even after centuries. It could be a lifesaver for colonists traveling to distant stars. The first experiment was simple. We made a potato cake, sealed it in a special container and sent it into orbit to test its stability. A year later, it came back, still tasty and fresh. Chapter 44. Returning to Earth. After returning home after so much travel, I realized that Earth had changed. Her cities had become more cosmopolitan, and food had become a tool to unite cultures. On the streets of New York, you could taste potatoes with Lyron sauce, and in Paris you could be served a dessert of Zaltirian spices. But what I was most excited about was that people began to see food not just as a way to get full, but as a way to socialize, art and self-expression. Finale, Potatoes and Stars. At the end of my life, I gathered all my friends, co-workers, and family at the very same restaurant in Idaho. It was a casual dinner, potatoes in their various forms. We talked about the past, the future, and how simple food has changed the world. "Who would have thought potatoes could reach the stars?" said one of the guests, laughing. I smiled. It didn't just reach the stars. It united us all. Chapter 45. The Mystery of Ancient Cooking. One day, after several years of success in gastronomic exchange between planets, I was curious, Where did the idea of food as a connection between cultures even come from? I started looking for information on how cooking originated in the universe, and came across one ancient legend. It was said that there was a civilization on a forgotten planet that had developed special recipes that could manipulate time and space. These recipes were so powerful that they were used not only for food, but also to manipulate reality. So I set out to find this planet. Chapter 46. Planet Zeltar. Zeltar was a planet covered with forests and oceans, where time flowed differently and the inhabitants could age faster or slower depending on what food they ate. Legend has it that there was an ancient archive of culinary knowledge hidden here that could reveal the secrets of managing time through food. I landed on the planet and was greeted by an old sage, a member of a local race that called themselves the Tilkara. He told me that their ancestors were masters of the culinary arts, able to create dishes that not only nourished the bodies, but also affected the mind and the world around them. If you truly want to learn about our ancient recipes, he said, you must pass a test, like all who seek true knowledge. Chapter 47. The Taste Test. I agreed to do so. The first test was the culinary maze, an ancient laboratory where all the recipes created by the Tilkar were hidden as intricate puzzles. In order to unlock each new dish, I had to cook something unique using limited ingredients. The process was incredibly difficult, and I got it wrong more than once. Once, while trying to boil a soup from local berries, I accidentally created a toxic vapor that nearly incapacitated me. But with each mistake, I grew stronger and was able to better manage my actions and understanding of the nature of flavor. Eventually I reached the center of the labyrinth, where a book of ancient recipes opened before me. These recipes were no ordinary recipes. They contained ingredients that could trigger memories, control time streams, and even alter emotions. Chapter 48. The Taste of Eternity. Among all the recipes, there was one that truly amazed me. It was the recipe of eternity, a dish that could slow down or speed up time for whoever ate it. It was made using plants that only grew on Zeltar, and had to be harvested at a certain moment when two suns were shining. Determined to put it to the test, I prepared a dish that turned out to be truly amazing. After I tasted it, the world around me changed. Time began to flow differently. I could see my life slowly unfolding as if through a lens, and could observe moments from the past that once seemed forgotten. Chapter 49. Returning home. After all the trials, I returned to Earth with new knowledge. But what was I to do with this knowledge? I didn't want anyone to use these abilities for evil, for I knew that such recipes could be dangerous. Deciding that the best place for them was my Galactic School of Taste, I returned to Idaho, where I began a new course in ancient culinary techniques. I continued to teach humans and aliens how to properly handle the culinary arts, passing on the knowledge of how food can change not only lives, but reality. And every day, as I saw people exchanging ideas and creating new dishes, I realized that gastronomy had become something much more than just an art. It had become a link between all worlds. Chapter 50. Secrets of Time. In spite of all I had learned, I kept thinking that the ancient Tilkar had not left all the information about their recipes. There was another recipe hidden somewhere, one that might allow them to not just alter time, but to control it completely. And someday, I might have to travel again to find it. But for the moment, I was happy that I could pass on to humans and aliens the knowledge that had given me such amazing journeys. With each new meal, I realized that it was food that connected us all, regardless of time, space, or origin. Chapter 51. Secrets left behind by the teal cars. Several months after returning from Zeltar, I couldn't get rid of the thought of that mysterious recipe that promised to control time. Even during lectures and cooking experiments, I kept coming back to those mysterious pages of the book I had brought with me. I once invited several renowned scientists and culinary experts to my galactic school to discuss ancient recipes. Among them was Professor Lurin, a historian of ancient civilizations who knew almost everything about the teal car. "Do you believe their recipes can actually control time?" he asked, studying an old book. I thought for a moment before answering. "I don't know, but I'm sure there are more secrets hidden on Zeltar. Perhaps this very recipe can help us understand how food can not only influence reality, but also synchronize it with other dimensions." Synchronize realities? Professor Lurin squinted his eyes. "This is no longer just cooking. It's alchemy. And you seem intent on unlocking it." I felt the urge to learn more ripen in my chest. I was ready to return to Zeltar again, but this time not just to study ancient recipes, but to see how they could be used in a more global context, perhaps even to explore other time streams that might affect the future. Chapter 52. In Search of the Missing Pages. After my conversation with Professor Lurin, I began to suspect that the key to understanding the recipe for eternity was hidden not in the book itself, but in the missing pages. I reviewed all the entries and realized that several important fragments had been torn out. I turned once more to the ancient artifacts brought back from Zeltar and began searching for traces that might lead me to these lost pages. The old sage who had once mentored me on Zeltar had left a few hints that signaled to me. In a forgotten corner of the school, I came across a seemingly insignificant cooking utensil. However, upon close inspection, I noticed hidden symbols on one of the utensils. It was an antique knife that appeared to have been used to cut ingredients for time-managed recipes. I realized it wasn't just a knife. It was a key that unlocked access to old, forgotten secrets. I could use it to find the last missing pages, but to do so I had to go back into the very depths of teal car culture. Chapter 53. Return to Zeltar. When I set out again for Zeltar, I already knew that I would not return home until I had unlocked all the secrets of ancient cooking. The planet welcomed me like an old friend, but this time I was ready to face its depths, its hidden corners where secrets had yet to be revealed. This time I traveled not to the city, but to the desert regions where the locals said the last scrolls of ancient recipes were hidden. The journey was long and dangerous, but I knew the answers were waiting for me somewhere out there. The local Teal'car were a bit wary, but accepted me as a seeker of knowledge, as someone willing to reveal the secrets of their people. One of the elders, meeting me at an ancient temple, said, "We have preserved the ancient secrets so that no one can destroy the harmony. But you come with good intentions. You must prove your worthiness, pass the test." I was ready. Chapter 54. The Trial of the Time Streams. The trials were not easy. You had to not just cook a dish, but interact with reality on another level. The Teal'car believed that every recipe was at its core a microcosm, a small fragment of the universe. They taught me how food could be used to manipulate not only time but also space, to create parallel realities. The first challenge was to prepare a dish of ours, which was supposed to alter the passage of time in a particular place. I chose ingredients that I brought with me from different worlds, including the same star fries that were once the basis of my success on Earth. As I prepared the dish and served it to the elders, they began to eat and I felt everything around me change. The space around us began to distort, creating time loops. I saw moments from the future, and they were not just reflections of possible events, but real changes in space-time. And that's when I realized, this recipe was not just a culinary art. It was the art of creating new realities. Chapter 55. Taste of the Future. Inspired by my success, I returned to Earth, but now with new knowledge. My school of flavors became more than just an educational institution. We began working with scientists and philosophers to understand how ancient culinary recipes could be applied to improve human life. Many people began to wonder if food could be used to not just change perceptions of reality, but to create the future. The answer I found was paradoxical: it all depends on what you want to see. Food, like time, does not exist in absolute form. It reflects our desires, our emotions, and our thoughts. Chapter 56. Eternity in the Language of Taste. I didn't know how this journey would end. Perhaps I would find a way to completely control time. Perhaps I would uncover secrets that lay beyond the known worlds. But I already knew one thing: food and time were two sides of the same coin, and I had become a skilled master of them. My journey was just beginning. Let's continue it by adding new twists and turns to the story. This story can take on unexpected shades, especially when we begin to delve deeper into the themes of time manipulation, interstellar political intrigue, and the emergence of new threats. Chapter 57. Forgotten Civilizations. When I returned from Zeltar and began to share my new knowledge with scientists and philosophers of Earth, I did not expect that my discovery would arouse so much interest among the intergalactic authorities. One day, when I was conducting another master class, I was unexpectedly approached by a delegation from Alpha Centauri. They were representatives of the Observing Assembly, a coalition of space civilizations dedicated to the study and preservation of cultural and technological knowledge. "We are watching your progress," the Assembly representative said, his voice sounding like metal transmitting a wave of alarm. "You are not the only one studying ancient culinary knowledge. The Teal'c were not the only ones to develop recipes that could affect reality." My heart skipped a few beats. I didn't know anyone else was researching such knowledge. "What do you want me to do?" I asked, intuitively sensing that this wasn't just a peaceful collaboration. "We're looking for the star key," he said, and in his eyes I could see the worry. "Recipes that can not only affect time, but also open doors to other dimensions. We're following you because you've found one of its parts. But I'm afraid we're not the only ones interested in it." Chapter 58. An Unexpected Ally. After my encounter with Alpha Centauri, it was clear to me that I was facing more powerful forces than I had realized. But before I could weigh everything, an unexpected ally came to me, a Teal'c elder I knew who seemed long gone. "You have found what you need," the elder said when I told him about the star key. "But know this, the recipes you seek are dangerous. Not only can they alter the passage of time, but they can create cracks between worlds." He told me that the ancient Teal'c sealed these recipes precisely to prevent them from interfering with reality. But soon some dark force emerged that sought to extract these recipes from the depths of the planet. "The force you've discovered isn't just cooking. It is a dark energy capable of destroying and creating realities," the elder continued. "You must be careful. Those who possess these recipes can warp not only worlds, but people as well. Chapter 59. The Chase for the Recipe. Once I realized the seriousness of the threat, I had to turn to my interstellar friends for help. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. We began looking for those who could help us protect the recipes from the destructive forces. I formed a small alliance, a group of scientists, cooks, and diplomats with one goal in mind: to find and neutralize those who were trying to retrieve the star key from the Teal-Car book. We traveled the planets, gathering information and traces, until we came across who was behind it all. It turned out that Alpha Centauri wasn't the only one following the recipe. There was an entire sect that called themselves the Dark Tastemakers. Their goal was to create a recipe capable of opening doors to other dimensions, to control not only time, but reality, which could have catastrophic consequences. Chapter 60. Confrontation. Our search led us to a hidden base in the rings of Saturn. The Dark Taste sect was hiding here, and I had to take part in the most dangerous battle of my life. We entered their temple, where rested the last part of the recipe that could destroy or revive universes. Inside the temple, everything was covered in golden symbols, each one like a culinary code that could affect matter and time. I was ready to confront them. Together with the team, we infiltrated inside and faced the Dark Tastemakers, ready to use the recipe to manipulate reality. We fought not only them, but also the time energy itself, which tried to resist our interference. And so, when everything seemed already lost, I realized that our strength was not only in knowledge, but also in unity. We came together and began to prepare a dish, not just as food, but as a symbol of resistance. It was a recipe that would not just change time, but heal it. Chapter 61. The Taste of Victory. At the very moment of climax, when time began to distort and reality was tearing apart, we served the Taste of Victory dish. It was the moment when the energy of harmony overflowed all dimensions and the dark force was neutralized. The Dark Tastemakers sect disappeared, and the recipes they were trying to use to destroy the world were sealed forever. We returned to Earth knowing that now we must not only protect the recipes, but also pass them on with care to avoid a repeat of such events. Chapter 62. A New Dawn. With each new discovery and journey, I realized more and more that cooking was not just an art, but an entire science capable of connecting realities, changing worlds, and creating the future. But now, because of the lessons I had learned from this journey, I knew that the true power was not in changing time, but in understanding it and living in harmony with it. I continued to train new chefs, diplomats and scientists, passing on the knowledge of how we can be true masters of reality through food. This is how I began to build a new path for all who are willing to seek harmony in the vast expanse of the universe. Chapter 63. Delicious Betrayal. After we disarmed the Dark Tastemakers and returned to Earth, it was clear to me that the world would never be the same again. News that humanity now possessed recipes that could affect reality spread instantly across the galaxy. There were more and more people who wanted to use these recipes for their own purposes. One such person was my old friend and colleague, Professor Lurin, who had taught me the basics of cooking at the Interstellar Academy many years ago. He was one of those who were keen on the idea of combining food and cosmic forces. But now I was beginning to suspect that his intentions were less than honorable. "We should use these recipes," he said when I visited his lab. "Imagine if we could create a dish that accelerates evolution. Humans would be able to evolve over several generations in a single lifetime. Time would no longer hold us back." His gaze was burning, but in the depths of his eyes I noticed something disturbing. This was not the Lurin with whom I had once shared research. He had changed. "You don't understand," I replied, feeling the tension building. These recipes could not only accelerate evolution, they could destroy the very fabric of reality. We need to be careful. But Lurin wasn't listening. He had already made his choice. And when I got home, I realized he wasn't going to stop. He was preparing to use the recipe for eternity, the one that could change not only time streams, but the very essence of life itself. He was preparing to reset reality. And if he succeeded, the consequences could be catastrophic. Chapter 64. Distorting Reality. Lurin took the recipe and began to create the galactic dish, using ingredients that could instantly alter not only space, but the nature of time itself. I traveled to him, hoping to stop him, but when I arrived, it was all too late. His entire laboratory was engulfed in light. There was an unnatural silence all around, and reality began to distort. I saw scenes of past, future, and present overlapping, and space became transparent and layered. "You can't stop me," Lurin said, emerging from the fog that enveloped his lab. "We can create a new world. A world where we will be free from the constraints of time." "You don't understand," I said, feeling time grow more and more confusing around me. "These recipes could destroy everything. We have to put everything back the way it was." But at that moment, all I could do was try to keep him from cooking the final dish that could destroy our reality. Chapter 65. A Taste of Chaos. Lurin took the ingredients in his hands and added them to the pot, which began to emit a bright glow. Time and space became increasingly blurred, as if the universe itself was trying to escape from what was happening. I felt reality begin to crumble, as if every particle of this world was on the verge of disappearing. But in that moment, I realized, if I used the recipe that the Teal'car elder had once shown me, I could stop the process. This wasn't just a dish. This was a soup of reality that could bring everything back to normal. But in order to do that, I had to sacrifice something. I snatched the pot out of his hands and without hesitation, I began to prepare this recipe, a recipe that could restore order to the universe. At that moment, I felt the space around me begin to shrink and the light began to dissolve. But the dish worked. The light began to dim and reality returned to its original state. Chapter 66. Consequences. As the world returned to its normalcy, I felt incredibly relieved. Lurin was gone and his laboratory had been destroyed. Reality was no longer distorted. But now I had to reassess what I had learned in those few months. I was back on Earth, but I was no longer the person who just wanted to explore cooking. I now knew that food was more than just a means of satiating the body. It was a door that opened new horizons. But that door could also lead to disasters. I decided to create a new course for those who wanted to explore cooking from this perspective. Not only were we teaching people how to cook, but we were also teaching them the responsibility that lies with those who use recipes with such powerful force. But even after all the experience, I knew, we are only on the verge of opening new, as yet uncharted horizons in the exploration of flavors, times, and realities. And the world may yet experience the consequences of these discoveries. Chapter 67. A Letter from the Future. Several years passed, and my research continued. We began to investigate how different civilizations had used cooking not only as an art, but also as a technology to manipulate realities. At this point, I received a letter that shook me to my core. The letter was signed by me, but labeled, "From the future." I opened it and read it. "You can't prevent this. What you did was only a temporary solution. The true effects of the recipes will begin when time begins to blur permanently. You must find the last part of the recipe or the future will be destroyed." I didn't know what to think. But I knew one thing: my journey was just beginning.